Hey, Freedom Nation, it's Jeff here once again with another episode of the Freedom Nation podcast. And on today's episode, I've got Igor Weinstein, and he is a business. Well, he sold a business. So we're going to talk a lot about that today. But what we're also going to talk about is a new game that he has created that is unique for those of us that are entrepreneurs or those of us that want to be entrepreneurs. So stay tuned. We'll be right back on in just a second.
All in you. Everything you're looking for, it's all in you. You gotta believe that it's all in you. Everything you're searching for, it's all in you.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. Igor, welcome.
Thank you. Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. And I can tell by your accent that you're from South Texas.
Absolutely. I mean, and especially because this is my second language, this, you can tell by I always say this, you can tell by my funky accent, this is my second language. So
yeah, well,
yeah, that's how the story starts, right?
Exactly. And about 20% of our audience, the weird part is about 20% of our audience are Australians. So I've had a lot of friends from Australia on the show. So we've kind of built an audience there. And all I say is Australians are just Texans with a funny accent. So
that's a good way of putting it.
And I would probably the opposite, I would say too. We're kind of cut from the same cloth.
Yeah.
Well, Igor, thank you for being on the show. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. We had a little bit of a pre-show conversation, and I'm excited to hear about the game and hear a little bit about your background. So why don't we kick off with your story? Tell us a little bit about how you got here today.
Yeah, well, I mean, thank you. And the second language is actually a fact. This is my second language. I didn't speak any English when I arrived in Australia in '91. I was almost 11. I came with my parents. I was born in former USSR, Soviet Union, for those that, have forgotten the old names. A little place called Moldova. It's next to Ukraine. My mom's from Ukraine, so I spent my summers there. And, I had this, entrepreneurial itch since a very young age, actually. And it's so funny, I in my keynote, I talk about my, the story of how I had my first business, which was like at a school camp in Sevastopol in Ukraine. And like when I was like 7. And my parents got like hauled into the Communist Party headquarters and like got absolutely reprimanded.
Kid?
Exactly, like you're raising this bourgeoisie pig, they said. But my parents were like, "Yeah, we're gonna get out of here." But not only that, there's a funny story, and it's funny when you write your own books or when you kind of go through your life, reflection points after you've had an exit. I'm sure you've had this yourself or your other guests. You go through this retrospection and like I remember all these stories from childhood, and so one of them is when the wall came down, Monopoly came to USSR and like the Russian version, and I got it and I played it, and then I got 2 others, and I just could never make enough money, and so I actually made my first own board game back in like 1988. Because I couldn't make enough money, fake rubles with all these other games, and so it's like a funny story. I forgot that story, and then I remember and I recount it now, and I'm like, it's an interesting thing. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. It's a question of, I'll talk a lot about, nature versus nurture. But it's like, if you think about like, I made my own board game when I was like 8 years old in Soviet Union, communist country. And then I made my own board game, like, now, like, and it's just wacky.
Well, I think the even better part is by 7, you were pissing off the Communist Party. Which that should just tell you right there you were moving down the right path.
Exactly. It's like, if you weren't pissing them off, you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that was a pretty pivotal moment. But when we came to Australia, we grew up very poor. We arrived with $200.
Wow.
And a couple of 4 suitcases. I didn't speak English, right? So I had to learn everything from scratch. Went to school, went to college. I actually started my first business when I was like 17. I did work experience at like the equivalent of NASA in Australia, and they had this thing called the internet. And I was like, wow, what is this thing, the internet? And I came back and I asked people, around just the shops around where I lived, do you have a website? And they're like, what's a website? I'm like, well, it's like this. See how you have this brochure like on your front window? It's like that, but on the internet. Anyway, long story short, I started making websites for like $100 for all these
Wow.
small businesses, local chiropractor, local, I don't know, mortgage broker, whatever. Mm. And that's 17. And then I actually got a job. While I was doing that, I still was doing that. I was full time in college, full time.
Okay.
As in like not turning up, but enrolled. And I also started working at Australia's second .com.
Okay.
And
Wow.
kind of long story short, went through. I don't know how I finished college, but I did manage to finish it and actually graduate. I just turned up to the exam basically, and like when I had like assignments, I would, yeah, I'm not a good example of how to go through college. And
Damn it!
and
If they'd
then
only had ChatGPT back then.
oh my God, my life would be so much better. And then my parents were like, you got to get a real job, whatever. So I went into the corporate world, and then I eventually I went to like a consulting firm, got headhunted by SAP, big German software company. I ended up being really good at what I did. But they're like, yeah, you're the youngest senior consultant in the world, but now you got to be there for 10 years because you're too young and no one's going to listen to you. And I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work.
That's not going to
Um,
work.
but I also back when I was 20, and I just finished college, my dad's friend, whose name is also Igor, gave me a present, which is Rich Dad Poor Dad by
Okay.
Robert
Wow.
Kiyosaki. And that changed my world.
Mhm.
And I read one of his advisors' books, Adolph Darousse, Real Estate Riches: buy property, renovate it, revalue it, take the equity out, buy the next one, blah, blah, blah,
Mhm.
blah, blah. So I did that. From 20 to 22, I bought 14 properties.
Wow.
And by 23, I lost all but two of them. So yeah, talk about, so
That was
entrepreneurial
yeah.
journey starts there.
That's always the
Right.
problem with the
Yeah.
whole, hey, just get it so tight, that you
Yeah.
have no
Yeah.
room for error, and then
Yeah.
it comes just completely
Yeah.
wipes you out. Yeah.
Absolutely. In sales, they say the sale doesn't start until the customer says their first no.
Yep.
Like, I think entrepreneurship doesn't start until you hit your first rock bottom. I
Yes.
think until you feel, and that's when it really starts.
Until you get the flying kick in the teeth, it's just not.
Yeah,
You're
absolutely.
really, nobody respects you at that point. So.
No. And so I lost everything, and I was down to like I got this crazy story. I was down to the last $2, actually the last 20 cents, because I had the $2, and in Australia they had $2 coins, like this gold little coin. And I went and bought a can of Coke because I was starving and needed sugar and needed caffeine. So the only thing I could afford, and I was down to like 20 cents. And I remember that moment. It was just so crazy. And then from there, I built a consulting company. I was desperate, borrowing, begging for money for work, and I went into IT world again, built a consulting firm from 0 to 22 people, 4.5 million revenue, from like
Wow.
23 and a half to 27 and a half,
Jeez.
27 or so, and then lost everything again, like literally overnight. So 1 million, and then went to rebuild, and then, borrowed another $500,000, and then global financial crisis hit 2008. I lost everything again. So there's like three wipeouts by 28.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. Um,
Perpetually larger wipeouts as you went
oh
too.
yeah, they're like, it's like, how they say compound interest is the greatest invention in humanity.
Yeah.
I was like on the wrong side of that.
Yeah.
Um, and
Compounding works the other way too, and it's not much fun.
exactly, yeah, dead compounds too. And so I would go like into my IT world where I was good at what I did, and I could get jobs and get contract, earn some money, pay off my debt, go into a business, wipe out again. So I kind of went up and down. And kind of back in 2010, my friend, I wasn't into golf. A friend of mine said, hey, why don't you take some lessons? I'm like, golf is for old people. It's like, try it. So I tried, and I got hooked. And then this business, it was an indoor golf center. It was going out of business. So we bought it, moved to downtown Melbourne, built it, whatever. It did okay. Then I started this, like barely, like I was making a couple of $100 a week. Like I couldn't even pay for food, or rent. I got married, had the first child. Like it was a great time to really be completely wiped out. I don't know how my wife, put up with me. And, and then, I opened like this, may have been first in the world, 24-hour indoor golf center, and I call it 24/7 Golf. And then first one did well, opened a second one, wipe out again. Are you seeing a pattern yet?
Yeah.
And um, And then when I wiped out the second one, I was like, well, I got to sell this on, I sold it on Facebook Marketplace, and it sold
Mhm.
really well. I'm like, oh, this could be something. And so I
Yeah,
bought a few
you
more,
do that.
sold that. Long story short, I ended up in e-commerce. Like, well, basically I pivoted the business. I closed down the indoor centers, and then the interesting thing was, bringing things from Australia to Australia from the US was really expensive.
Mm.
Some like all these golf simulator components, which is what my business was,
Yeah.
and I decided, well, I wanted to start manufacturing, so I started manufacturing in China, and
Okay.
then started bringing it in, and then the prices I was getting, really good margins, great business, and then COVID hits, and you know a lot of businesses suffer. Obviously, my business goes crazy through the roof, and I start getting requests for product overseas, and I'm selling internationally, and the people are like, I don't care how much it costs, just ship it. Um, and then towards the end of COVID, I expanded to the US, and then we moved the family as soon as we could leave Australia because Melbourne had the longest lockdown on the planet.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Um, it was crazy, right? So we moved to Dallas, Texas, and 6 months in, I nearly go bankrupt. Um, right, and 6 months later, I sell my company.
But the good thing is you're really good at this by now.
Yes,
So,
yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, um, so and that's what, that is a really really good point, and
Mhm.
we'll segue into that exact point later. But I'll just say this: that people ask me, like, how, what I ask myself,
Yeah.
how did you live through this?
Mhm.
Um, it's like going to the gym. You build this muscle of resilience,
Yep.
right? You keep doing the repetitions, and before you know it, fortunately or unfortunately, right? It really depends, and um, you realize that you can put up with a lot of pain.
Mhm.
And if you get good at overcoming these rock bottom moments, I say that, I've been to rock bottom so many times, I have a membership card,
Yeah.
right? And the funny part is that has allowed me to overcome so many obstacles. So now
Yeah.
when I hit an obstacle, I don't go into panic mode. I don't
Yeah.
stress, I just go, okay, well, okay, another one, right?
Yeah.
And you get good at, and the key, the absolute key lesson in this is you can succeed when you have the trust in yourself to overcome any obstacle that comes your way,
Yep.
right? And
And
that
you
is
don't
the
quit.
hardest thing. Yeah,
Yeah, and
and
not
this
quit. Yeah.
and not quit. And most people who want to be entrepreneurs and people who have side hustles or are building a business, they they try to plan. I've seen this a lot, right? I work with entrepreneurs, I mentor people. Like, they try to think of every scenario that could happen and kind of plan for it. It's
Yep.
like the thing that's going to wipe you out is the thing you haven't planned.
Yes.
And right, so like planning for all these things, yeah, it's good to have risk mitigation, it's good to have all this, but no, the thing that actually gets you through those things is the trust and confidence, and like a toolkit. But it's it starts with that trust in yourself, that
Mhm.
hey, I will work this out. And I find that is one of the hardest things for entrepreneurs who haven't had a lot of experience to kind of get into their system. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah. Well, and I think the other part of it too is something you just said there. Systems. Having,
Mm.
running a successful business or creating a successful business is a process. And I look back for myself. I mean, I had 7 failures before I had any success in business, so
That's pretty
I
normal,
should
right?
have
One, they
no
say one
right.
in nine, right? One in
Yeah,
nine
I mean,
is a
I
success.
should
So
have
yeah.
no right to be where I'm at today because, I if I was like a lot of people, I would have quit probably after number 2 and
Mm.
just said, "Well, maybe I just suck at this, maybe I'm bad at it." And I realize when I look back and I kind of look at my entrepreneurial journey, it was just that I wasn't committed. I wasn't
Mm.
committed and I didn't believe in myself, and I always had an out. And the last time
Yeah.
I took the out, I mean, I literally burned the ships at the shore and said, "Okay, I'm quitting my job and I'm going to do this." And there was no option, and I told
Yeah.
my wife, if we have to sleep in a car, that's what we'll do. Now, she didn't really fall for that trick, but I meant what I was saying. I'm not looking back. I'm not going to give up, and I'm
Yeah.
not. This is going to succeed, or something else is going to happen.
And look, I'm a big like, as I've learned through the lessons I've had, I'm a big fan of like side hustles, or
Yeah,
my team, I tell them, I said, hey, have a side hustle. I don't care. In fact, I encourage it because it'll make you better during
Yeah.
your day job, because you learn the priorities, you will understand me better as an entrepreneur by having your own side hustle. So I
Mhm.
think that really works, because cash flow is king.
Yep.
And when you're a small business, cash flow is like the biggest king in your kingdom.
Mhm.
Um, and burning, like I also agree with you. Like, you need to burn your ships, right, when you land, but you also need to not, like, be silly about it. And
Yeah.
for over
Yep.
a decade, I would just go all in, and it's like, yeah, I'll make the money, and then you don't, and then you're
Yeah.
like, uh-oh, you
Yeah.
know.
That's the one. Yeah. That's the one risk mitigation thing you can do. Don't give up the paycheck until you've got that paycheck coming in on a regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Um,
Well,
sorry,
so let's talk
sorry,
a
give me
little.
1 second.
Yeah. Oh, the light's coming in. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't want to get a tan.
Yeah. Well, and it was just like a little
Yeah, it'll be
line.
like a
You had
line.
like a
Yeah,
little
it'll look
line
weird.
across your face.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that sale. That everybody talks about, or everybody thinks about, hey, I'm going to have this exit and everything for my business. What was that like? Walk me through the process
It
for
was,
you. I know
it
what it
was a
was like
complete
for me. It
it was a
sucked.
complete surprise.
Yeah.
For me, it was a surprise. Like, I wasn't
Yeah.
planning on it. Um, and I think, so in my 20s, I would try to start a business. I'm like, everyone, all these books, they say you have to have the end in mind and all
Yeah.
that. And what I took that as, I'm starting this business so I can sell it for $100 million.
Hmm.
Um, Newsflash, that's completely the wrong motivation.
Yeah.
Um, and what I learned is you gotta build a great business.
Yep.
And if you build a great business, people come knocking on your door.
Hmm.
And that's kind of what happened to me. So I was building, I was expanding. I just hit this new stride after nearly going bankrupt in my expansion in the US, which cost me 3 times what I thought, and took 4 times as long
Hmm.
to get traction. And I was pitching these B2B partners, to sell my products, like a white label solution, like a contract manufacturing. And then one of the companies, which was, Golf Tech, one of the biggest names in the golf industry, they acquired another company called Skytrack, which was one of the number one consumer, launch monitor in the market. And they kind of, the founder, who I met through 10 years before, kind of called me and said, well, we instead of just buying stuff for you, how about we just buy you? And I'm like, ooh, okay. I never
Okay.
thought of that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I'm going to make, millions, billions of dollars, right? The first offer was pretty interesting.
Hmm.
And I said, look, I'm not sure that'll work. Like, it's, I kind of saw a lot more value. And that's another lesson, right? In exits. I'm sure you've seen this. Like, what you think your business is worth is usually way different to what other people think it's worth.
That's
And
exactly.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, you kind of need
You
to
you have
get a
you have
reality.
the highest opinion of your business that exists out in the
Yeah.
world.
So yeah, reality check really helps at this point. Mm. But the thing that I struggled to, it was a strategic sale, right? And
Mm.
strategic sales are the best sales.
Yeah.
But it was like I said to them, I said, look, I believe in my product so much that the only way we can really do a deal is if we both share in the upside, because you have amazing resources, you have this amazing brand, etc., etc. You have reach. I said, I have a product that I truly believe in,
Mhm.
and I think and I'm like, I think you're here because you believe in my product too.
Yeah.
And so we ended up doing a structured deal,
Mhm.
over a period of time where we both share in the risk. And like, if the product flopped, I wouldn't have gotten anything,
Okay.
but it didn't flop. It grew more than 10x in the first 18 months, 20
Yeah,
months of
having those
the.
extra resources and the reach
Oh
that they
yeah.
can get it to. Yeah.
I mean, it was on TV, during, Ryder Cup, or, the Open and all of that. Like, for me, seeing my product on TV,
Mm.
the stuff that I built, that I designed, I had a patent on, but like, it was amazing.
Yeah.
Could never have achieved that, on my own, unless I went and raised capital or whatever. I was, bootstrapped the whole way.
Yeah.
And so the experience was really interesting of, like, hey, don't look at what it's worth today. Like,
Mm.
how do we look at it, what it'll be worth over a period of time, to say 3 or 4 years, and how do we share in the upside? Because they're taking a big risk, taking me on board.
Sure.
I'm taking a risk that I'm kind of giving my fate, putting my fate in someone else's hands.
Mm.
So how do you marry those two? You have to align incentives. I mean, this is, a bit current, politically, a current, a good current moment. It's, not a political issue as such, but it's this idea of incentives.
Mm.
If you want to see someone's behavior, if you want to explain someone's behavior, all you have to do is look at the incentive
Yep.
structure. And so if you create the right incentive structure, and whether it's internally in your business or during acquisition, you both can align those things, and you can share in the upside. And I think that's a win-win for both parties. Does that kind of paint a
Yeah, it
picture?
makes sense. Yeah, it makes complete sense. Um, so you sold the business,
Mm-hmm.
in a kind of a unique way. I mean, and I like the way you did that because it allowed you to still participate and get a little bit more out of the business. But I think it was a kind of a brilliant move on your part because they were taking a ton of risk. They could buy the product and find out, well, it really doesn't
Mm.
sell as well as we thought
Yeah.
and lose money on it. So, I love the way that approach was. The how did the merger go? Because I know you were on board, or I don't know if you
I
still
still
are.
am. Still am. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you kind of merged in there and became part of the
Yeah.
company. How
My
was that
team
culture
became
then?
part of the company, and there were challenges. I mean, look, the biggest challenge, and I won't hide it from any entrepreneurs.
Hmm.
They're a 1,200 person company, right?
Yeah.
And I was like a 10-person company or
Yeah.
whatever. And I'm the founder, and so I consider myself quite unemployable.
Yeah.
And I think they consider me quite unemployable too. But obviously, the idea is that use me, and that's what they did, right? We worked together to build a business together.
Hmm. Yeah.
But really, like being part of a bigger structure is definitely not something that I want to do. But you need to do it as
Yeah.
in such a scenario. But that was probably the hardest part, is just being part of a corporate again. Because I've been in corporate before. I've worked in
Sure.
multi-billion-dollar companies in Australia, and there's it's interesting.
Hmm.
Um, it's not something I strive for or kind of want to go back to. But um, the lessons I learned allowed me to integrate easier because I have
Yeah.
worked in corporate. I actually have like a friend who was looking at selling his company, and he's never worked in a corporate, right? He worked in his dad's business, then he had his own business, and he struggled so much with the whole. It's like, why is this thing taking 2 months to? I'm like, that's what happens.
That's
It's a
yeah.
multi-hundred-million-dollar company. That's what happens in these
Yeah.
companies, right? And he
Well,
was
I
just
mean,
it was
I mean,
could
we sold, I sold an interest, my half of a wealth management practice where it was just my partner and I were the owners of the company, and it
mm,
still took 7 months to get it done. And I mean, it
yeah,
was a very amicable. We weren't fighting over anything, but it just takes time. You get
yeah,
lawyers involved. And they just start going back and forth and trying to get stuff for you, which that's what they do, and that's what you
yeah.
pay them to do,
And you
and
got to
you have
remember
to be
that when
patient.
people are in a structure, there's a multi-layer structure in an
Yeah.
organization. Um, they have different incentives, right? Their
Mhm.
incentive is not to take risk. Their
Yeah.
incentive is actually quite opposite. And so I have a huge appetite for risk.
Mhm.
So the way I would approach things is very different. So I push the envelope a lot with golf tech sometimes, and I'm sure they loved when I would tell them how to do things. Um, but this is the balance, right? The founder's
Mhm.
always going to be that hardcore pushing guy or girl, and the obviously the enterprise has its own rhythm. But if you can make it work, like I said, the results are amazing. The
Mhm.
results are truly spectacular,
Yeah.
and that is, it's like if you think about the end goal in mind and go, I can get through this because the result is worth it. I
Mhm.
think that's a good way to look at it if you ever struggling with that.
Awesome. So let's change gears here a little bit. You went back to your 7-year-old self and created a game.
I
So tell me a
did.
little bit about that.
Um, so funny enough, I wrote the game back in like 2007, 2008.
Okay.
But I was a very different person then, and I hadn't had success, and I put it away. I'm like, who the hell would want to listen to what I have to say? I'm a schmuck with no money and no business and whatever. I was like, yeah, this is not going to work. So I put it on the shelf, and then after I had an exit, and after 15 years later, right? A few kids later, a wife, different country, everything. I realized, there are some really good lessons, and the main thing I wanted to kind of convey, the thing I wanted to share with the world is, as you said, right? Most businesses, well, statistics are 1 in
Mhm.
9 succeeds. That means eight
Yeah.
out of nine fail. I've started over 20 businesses and I failed at most of them.
Yeah.
And the how do you build that muscle, resilience muscle I was talking about before? Like, how do you build that ability? Because you really only, most people kind of do it once, twice, maybe, right? Then they give up. And it's like, well, you give up because you don't trust yourself that you can make it. You go,
Yeah.
nah, it's not for me. I wanted to create a way for to gamify this whole process, and I was very much inspired by Robert Kiyosaki and Cashflow 101, where you're doing
Mhm.
these deals, you're buying property. So when I bought all these properties, like now buying property for me is like, hey, it's a piece of cake. I've done it so many
Yeah.
times. It's just a process you follow. And so I wanted to kind of take that principle and really apply it to entrepreneurship. And when I was doing play testing I've done multiple play tests before we launched it. And I remember the second or third time we were doing it, this group, young, sort of young 20s, wannabe entrepreneurs, some students, whatever, they were playing it. And they stopped halfway through and they're like, look, this is totally different to what we thought. I'm like, oh, tell me more. They said, we thought we'd be willing and dealing and collaborating on this. And we're actually doing risk management, financial management, cash flow management. And it's really hard. And we keep failing. I'm like, great. This is exactly what I want. This is the real thing. This is how it actually is. And so they're like, oh, oh. And like this like light
Well,
bulb
this isn't
moment, right?
fun. I don't like this. I want to do the
Yeah,
wheeling
yeah.
and dealing.
But then
Yeah.
they kept playing and they kept wanting to come
Mhm.
back and do more play testing because they loved it, because the reality is that's what they learned.
Yeah.
And because you play it with a balance sheet, asset, income statement, there's
Hmm.
all these cards in there. Like my favorites are deal with it. Like, because you
Okay.
know what? Stuff happens. Got to deal with it. Being stressed about it doesn't change it. It's still there. Got to deal with it.
Hmm.
And encounters is one of my other favorites. Is there are people you will meet in this world that will change your life for the better, for the worse, but and life, business, career, whatever. And so I've had a lot of that in my life where I've met great mentors. I've met mentors who I thought was a great mentor turned out to be a con man. Lost 100 grand, happened to me. And so those cards are in there, and so it's built on real life experience of my experiences, people that I know, people I read about, and the goal is to actually open it up to the world. People can go on and share their experiences, and they become cards in the game that other people can buy as expansion packs. That's the vision
Wow.
for it. But the idea is really to teach entrepreneurship, and the real entrepreneur, not the rose-colored glasses one. Like, no,
Mhm.
get your reps in. How will you be in a situation like this? How will you be in a situation like that? How are you going to be when you're about to lose everything, and you've got debt to your parents, and there's like, what are you going to do? And so
Mhm.
if you can practice those things in a risk-free environment, gamified socially as well, that's one thing. Like, I'm not making it into an app. I want you to sit at the table with other people. I want you to see how everyone else reacts and learn from that. That's kind of my vision behind it. And so, yeah, it's called EntrepreneurPolly, which is a mouthful.
Yeah.
Um, but it's been one of my proudest creations. Funnily
Yeah.
enough, I've done a lot of things, but that's been really cool to bring to life. And yeah,
Well,
just
yeah. And I
launched
mean,
it later last year, like late part
yeah.
of last year.
Well, and it's funny because it's funny that you talk about that because it is somewhat similar to cash flow.
Mm.
And actually, because I was kind of, I was on my own as an entrepreneur for quite a while. And I used to, there's an app that's only available on Android. It's only available on the PlayStation, or the Play, whatever.
Play Store, yeah.
Um, yeah, Play Store. That is, somebody made a cash flow game that you can play. And I would literally every single night I would play that for at least an hour every single night. And it was so good because it randomized stuff that you got,
Hmm.
and you had the opportunity to buy things. And if you bought too much, you could go bankrupt from, the cash flow from it and all that. And I mean, I literally, after the first probably year of the business where we were struggling massively, I started doing that as just brainwashing.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I think your game sounds fantastic because it takes it like the next level above that.
Yeah, thank you. And last night I was actually having a meal with a friend of mine who's an amazing entrepreneur as well, and we're both talking about how because he's done multiple $1 billion worth of development in property. He's got 4 or 5 businesses he's incubating, and he's we both kind of said like you get to a point where entrepreneurship is a game.
Yeah.
It's just a game. You realize there's rules. There is like
Mhm.
rules you can bend. There's rules that bounce. Things hit you in the face on a daily basis, but it's really a game.
Mhm.
And if you treat it as such, if you realize that it is just a game, with obviously risk and consequences, but it's still a game. And if you play it well, I'm pretty competitive, so I play to win. Um, I don't know, just it makes it more fun. It makes it more attainable as well because I love I used to play a lot of computer games when I was younger.
Mm,
And Yeah, it's like if you don't win the boss battle here, how do you expect to go to this level?
mm.
And so on and so forth. Like you always have that boss battle, and to me, these experience that I've had is like they're my boss battles, and
Yeah.
I've had to reload plenty of times and go, learn from the experience and go again. And it's just yeah, you just realize it's a game.
Yeah.
Um,
And I mean, it's a game, but you can, when you start to learn, uh, I tell people all the time, if I had to start all over from ground zero, I lost everything, I'd be fine. I'd be able to figure it out because the one skill that I have learned over the last 12 years is how to make money.
hmm,
And, that's the one skill I have. And if I have one superpower in the world, I understand how to make money. And so take everything away from me and let me start all over again. And honestly, the best part about that is you don't have all the garbage that you're carrying with you half the time,
yeah,
and
yeah,
you
it's
can start
exactly,
clean.
exactly.
Well, that is awesome, my friend. I love the idea, and I can't wait to
Thank
see
you.
the game as as you get it out there. Let's change gears and talk about the fast five questions now.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. So, first question, and this one is going to be funny for you because you've done it multiple times. Um, and I'm being generous with you here. If you lost everything, have started all over, lost your businesses and all that stuff, have 500 bucks, laptop, computer, place to live, food and clothing, what do you do first?
So, a great question, and yeah, it's a fun one to play out. So, I would look at what is my assets. So the knowledge is my asset, and the number one knowledge, asset that I have is really I've screwed up so many times that I have this amazing bank of experience of what not to do.
Yes.
And if you think about that, so one of my mentors once said to me, "You don't learn a lot from like the black swan, like outliers, right? So
Yeah.
companies that on their first go made $1 billion company, right? You
Mm,
don't learn. You learn from the people that have failed 100 times.
mm,
And so, if that happened, basically, I would find other entrepreneurs, and I would say, hey, I can provide a service. I can tell you how not to screw up because I've done it so many times. That's my number one thing. And I would start off as basically consulting because that's the
mm,
fastest way. Selling your time is the fastest way to make cash flow.
yeah.
Once you make that, then you got to productize what you have.
Mm,
And once but you need to solve the cash flow problem first. You need to live.
yeah.
And so I don't like service-based businesses
Mm,
um, because you're selling time. Very hard to scale, but it's also the easiest to start. You can literally start from when I started my consulting business. My credit card had just enough limit on it to start a company.
yeah.
And I had no other money, like to actually register the company with the Australian Securities Commission and whatever. And from there, I went from that to 4.5 million revenue in 4 years.
Mm,
I didn't have to ever invest because you
yeah.
just the cash flow funds it from a consulting point of view, but it's very hard to scale.
Mm,
So that's what I would do. I would go
okay.
and sell my
I love it.
time and tell people how not to do things.
Yes. I have a lot of experience in this.
Exactly.
What is the biggest business mistake you've ever made?
Only one.
Pick one.
Yeah, I know, I know. Look, the interesting thing is gut feel, right? Everyone says you have to be logical, and yeah, you do. But I'm a very gut feel kind of person.
Mm,
There's a book called Blink, right, which talks about how, we make decisions in a blink of an eye because our brains are wired for pattern recognition. And
yeah.
so to me, that gut feel is just pattern recognition that somewhere you've recognized a pattern. And there's been a couple of times when I lost everything when I saw the pattern and I
Mm,
didn't trust my gut and I didn't
yeah.
trust the pattern that I was seeing. And I convinced myself otherwise. So that as like a macro mistake, I would say that that has been something that I learned to now listen to. It's like when I see a pattern, it's like, that it's happening, maybe I'll get it wrong,
Mm,
but if I plan for, okay, this is likely going to happen and I plan for it and it doesn't happen, great. You made a plan, whatever. But if you've made a plan and it does happen, at least you're ready. You're not going to get sideswiped completely and hopefully not lose everything like I did many times.
mm. Awesome. What's a good book that you'd recommend for our audience?
Um, so generally, I love reading books about businesses that have failed.
Okay.
So I'll give you two books that I love. I remember, so there's one called Boohoo, about boohoo.com.
Okay.
Blew through 500 million of venture capital, way too early to the market. A great book, really interesting book. But my favorite book of a success and a business is Shoe Dog, the guy that started Nike,
Okay.
because it's not rose colored. It's like he tells it real, real pain, real story. And I love that.
Mm.
That's what I try to be when I share my stories. Is like, hey, it ain't champagne and
Mm.
G6s, right? It's a lot of pain. And I think that people need to hear the real thing, and so that they know what awaits them if they want to be entrepreneurs. This is what's waiting for you. So
Mhm.
be ready and just build that trust that in yourself to overcome all those things. So Shoe Dog would definitely be probably my number one pick.
I love that one. All right. What's a tool that you use in your business every day that you might recommend?
Um, I thought about, like, there's a couple. I use a lot of AI tools, all that. But I really, LinkedIn is probably one of the main tools I use. Like I connect with people. It allows me to see what's happening.
Mm.
Yeah, that funny enough, LinkedIn is one of the things I'm spend a lot of my day on.
Yeah,
Yeah, so big fan of LinkedIn. Also, if you ever want to like reach me or any of you listen, like I just
that's the
hint,
place.
LinkedIn, right?
That's the
That's where I
place to
am.
find you. Uh,
I ain't on TikTok.
yeah. All right. Last question. What is your definition of freedom?
um, yeah, that's a good one. Freedom is a very big value for me,
Mm.
and especially now that I have kids, I have a family. I love my family. I have the most amazing family. Um, way better than I could ever imagined it. And so, freedom for me is not just financial. A lot of people put financial freedom. That's what I used
Yeah.
to be. Financial freedom without time freedom is nothing.
Mm.
So you could be making $1 million in a salary, working 16-hour days, never seen, kids don't know who you are.
Hmm.
That's not freedom. So
Yeah.
for me, freedom is, a friend of mine actually put it really well. So it's a lack of worry.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and for me, one thing my wife and I do every year, first week of the year, we write out like what would be a most crazy good year, right?
Mm.
Like, how many massages do you want? Like really specific, like a week.
Mm.
How many trips a year do you want? Where do you want to go? How much are they gonna? And that's how much it's gonna cost. So we actually cost it out,
Yeah.
and the number is usually a lot lower than you realize. You don't need
Yeah.
millions of dollars. Yeah, it's a couple of 100,000, right? But it's
Mm.
not millions. And
Yeah.
then you realize, like, if that is all it takes for me to have the freedom of the life that we dream about as a family, um, it becomes really attainable.
Yeah.
It's not a pipe dream anymore. It's something you can truly work away at. But most people, and I think you said this, I can remember if you early on or pre-show chat, people who have a lot of people who have businesses, like they're entrepreneurs, but they're not really entrepreneurs. They have a job,
Yes.
right? That they have to pay all the other salaries first, and they pay themselves sometimes.
Mm.
Um, you know, a true entrepreneur, a true business, if you want to build something, if you want to have time freedom, you need to build it in a way that you can go away for a month. And in fact, if the ideal business, the concept of anti-fragility is that, you go away and it actually runs better
Yeah.
because you are the
Yeah.
bottleneck. You're a pain in people's
You're the
butts.
bottleneck for all that. Yeah. Here's how you identify the bottlenecks for everything. Step out of your business for about a month and
Hmm.
don't call in and see if the business survives. And if it does, you're the problem.
Exactly. And so for me, freedom means spending time, which doing whatever things you love,
Yeah.
and being around the people you love, and being there for the people that when they need you, like your
Mm.
kids,
Yeah.
or your wife, or your parents, and that's it. I mean, flying first class is nice, but
Mm.
you know, if you have the time freedom to go to whichever island in the world you want, and you have to fly coach, it's like it's okay. It's still pretty good.
Yeah. Life will be good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, the funny part is, and my wife and I were in the process of doing this because we've got a plan in about 3 years because we want to be able to take like a month and just go to the countryside in England and hang out for a
Mm.
month. And if you're not going there as a tourist and you're going there just to live, it's not that expensive. I mean,
No.
that's the reality. I mean, if I was in central London, I'm going to pay $300 a night. I can
Yeah.
rent a nice cottage in the Cotswolds for like $2,000 a month. You
Yeah, yeah.
know? So, I mean,
I know.
that's the reality of it is. So you really need to kind of cost that stuff out. And I love what you guys do at the beginning
Yeah,
of the year of
it
just,
makes it real
cost it out and
because
figure it out. And yeah.
people put things on their vision board, and they put it, and
Mhm.
they put a dream car or this. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
well, look, do you want to own it? Do you want to just rent it? Do you like
Yeah.
which part of that do you want? And that's when the two books are written are really about that process of manifestation, because ultimately people say a lot. I want freedom, but I
Mhm.
like your question because okay, you want freedom, but what does that mean?
What does that mean to you? Yeah.
Does
Because
having a
everybody wants a different
Ferrari,
version of that. Yeah.
yeah, having a Ferrari with like 5,000 a month payments that you've got to make for 4 years, and the maintenance
Yeah.
and the insurance, and you're locked in and you can't, if you miss a payment, blah, yada yada
Yeah.
yada, right? You extrapolate that, it's like, is that really freedom,
Yeah.
right? And and
Well, and
then
I
you
mean,
go,
yeah.
you hierarchy it, and you realize all the things you think you want are actually not the things you want.
Well, and the funny, so one of the things I had always wanted, bucket list item was I wanted to drive a Lamborghini. I've never wanted to own a Lamborghini. I wanted to drive one, and I
Hmm.
wanted to drive it in its natural environment, which is not driving around the streets of Austin, Texas, because you'd
Hmm.
lose your teeth in that process.
Yeah.
It needs to be wrung out on a racetrack. And so we have an F1 track here in
Hmm.
Austin. So I went in and figured out, okay, I can go and there's a service where you can rent a
Yeah.
Lamborghini and do 2 laps around the F1 track here in Austin. And I discovered through that process that the Lamborghini was designed for 5'2" 125 pound Italians, not 6'3" 240 pound former rugby players. So
That's
it was
funny.
one of the most uncomfortable experiences, but I can say I did it and it cost me 500
Yeah.
bucks
Yeah. Exactly.
and I actually in the book that I've got coming out, I talk about there was 12 more experiences like that I wanted to do, and
Yeah.
all of them cost 500 bucks. So I created an income stream that would generate 500 bucks a month, and I just went and spent a whole year doing all these things that I've always wanted to
Awesome.
do.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. That kind of reverse engineering is like my hobby. I love that.
Yeah.
That's great.
So, I mean, awesome. I love it. So we can get you on LinkedIn. So we'll make sure we put your link to LinkedIn on our show notes. But anything, where do people find out about the game and how do they get their hands on it?
Yeah, so if you can spell entrepreneurpoly.game, you can go to that URL. If you can't, you can go to biz.game, biz.game, and that'll
Okay.
redirect. So you're okay. I've done the short version. Check it out. If I'll actually, I'm also looking to donate 1,000 of these games. So if you
Oh,
have
cool.
any non-for-profit schools, people that can't afford it, doesn't
Mm,
matter. It's not about the money. Just send me an email on the website, or buy it, whatever.
mm.
I will send donations. I've been doing, I was in Bali recently, and got to donate a couple of games to this amazing school for Balinese kids that are teaching them financial literacy.
Mm.
Just donated to a winners in Dallas, this entrepreneurship kids kind of pitch challenge, and
Okay.
the top five. We given games away. So yeah, really really excited to share this message with the world. So any donations, please. And if anyone wants to look at it for themselves, obviously you can go on the website, buy it. And if you want to reach out, just hey, follow me on LinkedIn, send me a message, and tell me your story.
I love it. All right, bud. Well, thank you very much. Enjoy your time with family down in Australia, and we'll see you back here in the States soon.
Thank you.
Folks, make sure that you take a look. We'll put the links to all this in the show notes so that you can go and check out the game and connect with Igor. And make sure that you hit that subscribe button and give me a comment. We'd love to hear if you enjoyed the show. Always love to have those conversations with you. So thanks a lot, and we will see you guys back here the very next time.
Thanks, Jeff.